Yo, 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 ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a mod stream. A Todd stream, in fact. As today... Oh, restream chat killed itself again. Classic. Alright, today we are having some software issues, but is there really any other reality to live in? It seems like a relatively commonplace situation where anytime Steam has a problem launching a game, it just refuses. My task manager will forever refuse to open, so... I don't know what that is. That must be some Windows 10 shit. Well, it could just be Steam is shit. But in fact, let me try now that I've closed Steam. I'm guessing it still won't open. Yeah, of course. The classic. What's up, Balethal? What's up, Cullen? Where the fuck would this even be? I apologize for this hilariously stupid intro. Oh, that is pretty epic, actually. Congrats. Is there a way I can see a list of open processes without... Hold on. I would like to figure out how to see a list of open processes without needing Task Manager open. Is there like a process? No, I don't need to view process info. Processor info. Whatever. This is just shit, of course. All right. Anyway, big news. We're renaming the cybernetics core today. That'll be probably the only modding I do today. I just have to hope that whatever open process is freezing my entire fucking task manager. Why does that even happen? Why would a hanging process stop task manager from opening when that's the main reason you open task manager? Pretty hilarious, TBH. Anyway, we'll get to this renaming gig. We do like to do that. Yeah, that is a pretty low price to pay, right? All right, so we will say Cenotaph. Okay. Pretty easy stuff there. Well, the thing is, Balethal, it would make a little bit of sense if this was one of those cases where, like, I don't know, it doesn't really ever make any sense to me. But if I had to say, like, here's an example where this would make sense. I would suspect process gets hung. Okay, that can happen. Like, not really a huge deal, TBH. But I wouldn't expect Task Manager to not start. I don't know why it so consistently happens. Wait, I don't know what you mean. Is that like paying for a higher up license or something? Like on a higher license, you don't get fucked as much? All right, we'll say rename cybernetics core. And now we can say cenotaph. Push that finally. That's pretty disastrous. I wonder why they're allowed to get away with this shit. I guess it's because nobody else has made a competent operating system. That would probably be why. All right, we'll just grab all these. That was a weird one. Haven't seen that before. I don't think that all of the end user license agreement stuff that comes out there and says you do not own this product. I don't think that would actually hold up in court, but I guess that hasn't realistically been challenged, has it? Oh wait. Should probably put that in there. I do enjoy that there's a fucking project name called Deerfucker. Pretty appropriate. So I did a tiny bit of work on this yesterday. Mostly it was just evening out some tiles and stuff, adding a tiny bit of decoration in a few places, like a couple of small flourishes, marking out some areas with sand dunes and stuff that previously didn't have it, like over here, for example, in the Trinity Terran base. Before I get too far on the placement of some of the other AI, I do want to figure out essentially what they're going to be up to. And maybe we should use this opportunity as well to reflect on the idea of solidifying this map as one of those areas where there are going to be some pre-placed things. I would like to just figure out exactly how much that's going to be done. How much is going to be done in these areas. What about Apple? You were talking about like right to repair and stuff? About they don't own their phones or something? If they don't own their phones, you know what that means? That guy at Diablo Immortal from that old BlizzCon a couple years back. Whew. The answer to that question is no. Technically, we do not own our phones. I'm not quite sure if that's exactly how it works, but I've listened to quite a few Louis Rossmann videos on that topic, which doesn't make me qualified to speak on it necessarily, but I'm just saying. He does talk about how he can't get parts to properly repair anything, which is obviously pretty infuriating for him as a repair shop. A repair shop owner. Glad to know that desert is like all of the other tile sets in this fucking game where you can just have the wrong tile blended pretty consistently. Actually, it looks like this is the intended one, but whatever. Hard to tell where my pixel resolution at. Yeah, exactly. That's actually another area where the right to repair stuff has caught on a bit. There was like some guy, some congressman who was like, "Why is it that I can't seem to ever get my Xbox 360 controller fixed anywhere aside from Microsoft, and that they take 6 months to do it," or something. The fact that he had firsthand experience with this shit was it's just pretty funny. Oh yeah, another thing I did was I slapped this higher ground stuff up here. So one thing I am cognizant of is that the mains are very small in this map, but they also spill out pretty easily into a lot of other areas where you could do build space. It's not like I've put a bunch of like rocky ground and stuff everywhere. I will put some over here, for example, to block some build space. But let's see. Yeah, that seems to be the main reason why. What do you mean by crashed? Like it just you couldn't even log in or something? The Joy-Cons. I don't even know what a Joy-Con is, to be perfectly frank. Is that like part of the controller or something? What is so awful about them exactly? I know I said I was going to extend this out, but I don't actually think I will, so this is pretty ugly as fuck now. Just try to fix that. Well, Microsoft is a small indie company, so what can you expect? It's just how it is. If people just didn't have such high expectations from this small indie company, it wouldn't be so disappointed. Some people actually believe that. Wow, that is pretty impressive. Okay. I was thinking that it would make sense to have an expansion along this ridge over here, especially since it would almost encourage you to not necessarily have some like artillery units or whatever over here in a natural way. Like I'm not saying you can't, and you, like so you can pepper this area, but you know, this is an area where you can very clearly see how like somebody could take this base and somebody could take this base and they could be hostiles and the bases would be able to coexist. Like they're defensible enough or whatever. So I'm okay with that personally. And then there's still a decent amount of turret room here. I guess if I really wanted to, I should move this down a bit. Maybe something like that. So you got more turret room. The other question is whether or not it's even... Yeah, I didn't think so. Actually, what would that look like? No. No. I think that's a bit more reasonable. It's probably just one of those things where wherever Nintendo is manufacturing them, something is lending to like poor quality control or obviously something inconsistent, from what I can tell from that description. All right, I think for now we can the whole like hardware manufacturing thing is such a black box for most people. If you go and watch some of Gamers Nexus's videos from way back before the pandemic, obviously they actually went to some of these manufacturing plants and interviewed the people there, and I'm sure they gave them like a very pretty look or whatever. You know, they try to look good for them since it is something of like a press deal. But it's actually kind of interesting how like we know very little about what actually goes on in those manufacturing plants and stuff. Just as the people who are actually buying it, we have no idea what the process is for how it gets on the shelf, so to speak, virtually or otherwise. It's pretty wild to think about. Thanks, Sam Draft. Much obliged, my man. My man! Who still hasn't updated this program in over a year. Sure. Sup, Potato Kitty? How you been? We've done some pretty good planning over on the website. Check that out if you go to fraudsclub.com/HYDRA or just click this. And then there's a sites page, which then has the planning. Website still needs a little bit of work on like navigation and stuff where we actually have this stuff in drop down menus, but you can see what we've written up so far and how we've gone. I'm actually doing a one-off mission that's not really meant to be a campaign or part of the campaign, as a way to explore the setting a little bit since we've reimagined so much. I want to get my feet wet with some of the factions that maybe we won't see for a little while in the campaign itself, but still I think are very interesting to explore. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now, while also just kind of getting back in the groove of map making in general, since it has been a little while since I've done that. But yeah, overall, I think things are going quite well. I made some concepts for a bunch of new units recently that are looking very interesting. Certainly stuff that I want to explore. I'm not sure how many of them can be implemented in this engine, unfortunately, but nothing overly demanding about the concepts themselves. It's mostly the lack of entries we have in the unit limit that are going to hold us back, if indeed anything does hold us back at all. What's up, Viker? Making things awesome. And then blue screen. That would be the ultimate bit if it just like crashes your whole computer. let's see what's going on here. Not a massive fan of some of these blends, to be honest. So I did want to turn this into a bit of like an actual place for a base, but I don't know about that one. So here's the rub. I really do want units to be able to move like below this and wrap around if they want to. But the map is just so small that right now I don't think that's possible with the current space that we have got. So I'm kind of thinking about reimagining that a little bit. I like the shape. It's very weird and almost like, not really spidery, but it has that like multiple limbs thing going on there, which, you know, considering the Zerg start right there is kind of like, it's a very small touch, but to me, I really like the way that this is just like very strange looking and doesn't immediately like vibe with normal Terran aesthetics or what would normally be reflected by Terran architecture. Like something like this is obviously a lot more utilitarian, where this just seems really wild. Like maybe you can imagine there are like power generators in here or something. I don't know. But I feel like that looks pretty interesting, pretty neat. And then when we take a step back from that, it's like, I still want people to be able to move below this, just kind of sneak underneath. I'm not sure if that's really reasonable gameplay exactly. They can just go across, but... Make map thicker, yeah. What's up, Iron Torch? Yeah, the problem is I also want to deliberately make this map a little bit on the smaller side, insofar as we get to explore that claustrophobia type theme, where there's just a large number of players, a decent amount of bases, reasonable amounts of build space, but maybe a slightly less in the build space thing, or the spacing is so small that it doesn't feel like cramped in a negative way. I mean, this is going to be down to taste for a lot of people, I guess. But for me, I want this to feel like a map where you do have to be on your guard, and the travel distance between you and your opponents is going to be kind of small, and it is a free-for-all, and a team free-for-all, so there's like 3 teams going at it in this map, and players arriving in the middle of the battle, and a bunch of stuff like that is going to be really interesting. So like, I wrote up the goals the last time I did a stream. I think this was Monday morning. And I said that one of the goals of this map is to introduce players to the concept of hostile forces arriving after a mission has already begun. With 4 of the 7 belligerents arriving in medias res, which just means in the middle of the battle, players may feel an overwhelming sense of danger as they will not be able to predict the actual enemy count. This is obviously like, I guess, the first time through. This will stress scouting further, but may inadvertently encourage poor players to play in an exceedingly conservative fashion. So this is basically me saying, like, if you're on the weaker side of the skill spectrum and you're also like just learning HYDRA or whatever, this map is not a very nice introduction map. It's not very friendly, very beginner friendly in that sense, either in terms of skill or in terms of like introduction to HYDRA. It just kind of throws everything at you. There's no tech tree restrictions for you or your opponents. And crucially, it's not even straightforward insofar as you know exactly where the enemies are and when they're showing up or whatever. You may have some intel on a single player. This player will be at the beginning of the map, but he's actually the only hostile at the beginning of the map. It's you and your Zerg, and those are the only players that these 3 players are the only ones here. The majority of the combatants are actually coming in from like in the middle of the battle or whatever, arriving post hoc. So I think that's actually really an interesting pitch. It's not something that's never been tried before. I believe Necron's version in UED AIP, his sort of remake of the original campaigns, or not necessarily a remake, but he's like outfitted a lot of the maps with new AI and stuff. I think in Omega, the final mission, he had a bunch of AI sort of arrive as time went on. That map was kind of meant to, when I played it anyway, it was meant to almost be sped run in a very specific like puzzle-like fashion where you absolutely needed to know where the players were and you needed to do like X, Y, Z in the right order and stuff. So I'm going for something a lot more flexible than that, where you can play a little bit safer or more conservatively or economically focused and expand a bunch of times or whatever. If that's what you want to do, if that's your play style, just really bunker down and figure out exactly the entry points into your sphere of influence, and then sort of let the free-for-all take care of itself in that way. Just try to hold on. If that's your play style, if that's what you want to do, then that's totally like fine. If you play to a high enough level of skill, then you can make that work. So I want to support multiple strategies, essentially. But it's something that I've been toying with for quite a while, having a large number of players, in this case, more players than not, arrive halfway through the map. I think that's really neat. And it's also a very small map. So you kind of have less overhead of like, I need to scout this whole map and figure out everything. Like it's a smaller map. It's on the smaller scale of things in terms of the maps that I've made recently. So it should be a bit easier, I think, for people to acclimatize to. I like how if anything has 4 like sides or whatever, everybody immediately thinks it's a swastika. What's up, Luciferius? Quite an entrance you've just made. What do you mean by sleep timers exactly? I do kind of like the battle royale format as it could be used to describe something like this. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be less than excited about that comparison, but I actually think that that can do a lot for essentially an RTS. I think there's a lot on offer there that people. Obviously, you can't really naturally encourage players to like go out into the middle of the map or whatever, so you can get stalling. Like I'm not saying like, oh yeah, and if you've expanded on the outer edge of the map, eventually those expansions just get blown up or something. Like that's really stupid. But I do like the idea of these really large free-for-all type scenarios. That's where I would want to take the new engine when we have like unlimited units and obviously like we've got like 12 fucking races and stuff, just crazy amounts of variety, all that strategic depth that you can even think of. I think all of that stuff could be really, really cool. And the idea being that you almost get these superpowers in different areas of the map, as I would call them. And it allows a very different look, I think. It's just really neat, in my opinion. All right, I think that will do it. Trying to make this somewhat symmetrical in terms of how far out it extends. Just give it a little bit more unfettered ground, and this just needs to be extended one more. All right, now we get some sort of symmetry. I guess it would be a little bit cleaner if this just came straight out into, like, if it didn't have to zig, zag, zig, or whatever. Or I guess it would be zig, zag, yeah, whatever. If it didn't have to do this, like, L over here. Ah, minerals run out quickly. I guess that could work. Yeah, you guys can't run with that, can you? Over there. That symbology might just be fucked. I mean, especially with people just calling, like the insanity on social media where people are just like, "What? You are fiscally conservative? Nazi! Nazi alert! Alert!" That doesn't help things, does it? All right, now I've made that symmetrical too, see? Things are just subconsciously nicer when they're symmetrical. At least if it's meant to be something man-made. IMO. You know, Veek, you say that, but I think it is possible. So, what you could do... What you could do, right, is a player. This is technical jargon, so anybody who's not super familiar with how this stuff works at an engine level is going to get lost here. So, when an AI loses all of their structures and workers, and in Zerg's case, Ovaleths or overlords in vanilla, basically those are the buildings or the building AI or worker AI or whatever that are assigned to a town. When all towns that an AI has have no units assigned to them, that makes it so that the town essentially gets deleted because there's nothing holding on to it anymore. What you can do is, if we can somehow recognize when that is the reality, um, we can maybe like make their units go on like a suicide script or whatever, where they just sort of they try to mass up and attack like as a formality. Like let's just go like our force where this is not a retreat, or whatever the case may be. Obviously, with Zerg, it would make a little bit more sense for them haphazardly like flying out everywhere. But especially in a free for all, that's actually kind of thematic. Oh, you've destroyed all of my shit. Well, time for a strategic suicide. Let's go and see what happens. That could be quite interesting, and maybe that's actually how we have the AI quote unquote surrender. Is by just having them send everything at you once they lose all of their production structures and don't have enough money to rebuild. So we would run that. And again, we kind of like the main issue that I have is you have to make sure that the AI at least has that send suicide script active. But then I think you can clear combat data, and I'd have to look in again at what exactly that does. I'm not sure if we have a proper documentation of that command. Here we go. Oh, okay. This is just for attack parties, so that's actually not relevant at all. So I think what you could do at that point is you could just create another player or another like task force, shall we say. It would have to be of the same race. It would be obviously the same color. But you could have another wave of Protoss show up under the same banner and start expanding again. I guess the main issue is, especially since it has to be the same color and same race, it does feel a little limited. Like and then of course the other issue is it's not even just that. It's also like, oh, there's like a million edge cases that can happen. But there's also like the issue of clarity for the player. Like, how do I know I've actually defeated these guys? Maybe if I defeat all Protoss simultaneously, no more Protoss can show up. But until then, if one Protoss is still alive, then another one can come into its place or like reinforce the second guy or something. Maybe that could be interesting. Like that could be one way to do it. And maybe there's a limited number of redeployments or something. But I don't think that's beyond like that's not certainly not without the out of the question. Maybe that even happens to the player's forces. Like you're playing single player, your Zerg ally gets destroyed. Maybe he can redeploy given enough time or something. I don't know. I would have to think about how to implement that system. So I can write that down anyway as a consideration. Consider redeployment once defeated. Yeah, we had a community member go through and try to repurpose the AI in Starcraft 2, and like he was able to significantly improve the performance of the AI, but it was not without faults. It still ground his very high end hardware to a halt without much chance, unfortunately. After having like just a couple of players, I don't think he could get acceptable. Yeah, I actually don't know if he could even get acceptable performance on in a 1v1 map or something. I think even that was kind of fucked. All right, let me consider some more stuff. Where was I going with that whole discussion anyway? Oh yeah, we were initially talking about the map size. I think if I just take this whole area, right, and maybe if I just do this. I might be able to Wait, what? Oh, I think it's this, that. Isometric tiles are pretty good. Pretty fun. All right. And then it's just this. And then I never did get that. Okay. Yeah, if I just move this up, right? It would be like up, right. Would that be enough? I think that may have just done it. All right, let's see. Can't get rid of the creep. That's another classic bug. We'll just relaunch the fucking program. It is made for FPS, isn't it? Yeah, the problem is if we actually gamify it in a setting, it does feel a bit odd for like the money thing. I guess it could be, but I don't. We would need some custom UI elements, right? It's pretty disgusting when you see all the people who are like, back when I looked at the BattleNet forums for Remastered, I saw like daily or weekly threads where people were basically saying shit like, please, Blizzard, let me buy some more skins. I want to pay you for skins. Fucking vile. Vile behavior. All right. So let's think about this one. We've allowed some rear entry. Always nice. Love me some rear entry. Yeah, you might be onto something there, Bale. Maybe the reason why everybody loves Lard is because they're all like into that financial domination stuff. They just want a corporation to be their mistress instead of an actual woman. Just saying, it's a thought. I'm just having ideas, man. I'm just asking questions. Anytime a company doesn't put stupid microtransactions are by definition like insanity. Anytime a company doesn't opt into a practice that is continuing the downfall of this industry, I am quite happy. And I don't think that will change anytime soon. I remain entirely unconvinced that it's by any means necessary for the industry to have fucking micro trannies everywhere. I don't get it. Like, I'll never really understand it. I mean, again, I'm doing a lot of CS:GO content, right? And Counter-Strike is a game that basically lives and dies by its skins. But it didn't have to be that way. It could have just grown more naturally and had less scandals and less underage gambling. It's just been less fucking miserable for most people. could have done that instead. In fact, you know, I hate to say it, but we could have had some nice things, believe it or not. I will be more than happy to be the old man yelling at a cloud in this scenario. Disguiser really has no fucking place here, does it? I guess we'll try that. Nah, Potato Kitty, I'm a pretty big absolutist in this. Microtransactions, even if they're only cosmetic, are absolute cancer and should be excised from the industry at the earliest possible opportunity. There's just no actual way to justify them, right? Because everybody thinks, oh, well, you don't have to pay for it. Oh, well, you know, but the problem is that you're rewarding a developer who is, by definition, not producing content. And you are buying not content. I almost destroyed my whole setup. You are buying not content the entire time. It's pretty indefensible as far as I can tell. Like, there's no way around it. It's the normalization of not spending money on content and instead spending money on what takes like 5 seconds to make, essentially. A lot of these things started off as like palette swaps in League of Legends, for example, where they literally just went into Photoshop and changed some textures in RGB settings, like a hue shift. People started paying for that. I'm sure Riot were like, people are paying us for this? Because it's unfathomable. How the fuck would anybody spend money on that? And yet, they did. They spent that money, homie. So it's just rewarding, essentially, just incredibly scummy practices. I think cosmetics should just be free customization options that you... I don't think they should even be unlocked by grind, to be honest, because cosmetics are just expressive. They're allowing you to show, like, this is the kind of image I'm going for or whatever. It sounds silly, and it is kind of silly, to be honest, but that's what cosmetics are. It's like, oh, I want to look at this knife in CS instead of the default knife. Like, that's what it should be. But because people have decided it's reasonable to pay, like, hundreds of dollars on knives, on digital items. Like, I think after Skadoodle won the major for Cloud9, his op sold for, like, $60,000, his op skin. Because it had, like, his autograph on it or something. Like, that's fucking wild, man. And these are obviously, like, edge case examples. But whales are everywhere, and they'll pay for stuff even if it doesn't matter. Now, obviously, it crosses into a completely different territory when it does, in fact, matter. Which is what you see in gacha games and stuff where, like, there's not really any gameplay anyway, but you get them, you spend that money on JPEGs, essentially. Like, that's unfathomable to me. Yeah, well, most industries are essentially what we call follower industries. They're not like a bunch of really like savvy business people who see and entrepreneurs or whatever, they see opportunities and go for them. They just look at whatever the next person is doing and say, all right, let's do that because it's working for them. So maybe it'll work for us. Hopefully it'll work for us. And they find ways to dress that up to their investors or whatever. Like, we have seen a pattern of success with this particular model in our industry, and we think we have what it takes to take it to the next level and get it even higher up there in terms of financial success and return on your investment or whatever the fuck. So they'll find a way to say it in really long, articulate language and sound like they're saying a lot when in fact they're saying nothing. And that's eventually how you get stuff like, oh, guys, my task manager started. The process killed itself finally. Yes. In fact, it started twice. That's pretty good. That was only like, what? How long have I been streaming? I've been streaming for 54 minutes, and I had hit that button 54 minutes ago because I hit it before I hit the OBS button. Wow. So it almost took an hour, but the process closed. I'm so excited, man. That's fucking crazy. That's pretty banging. That is not every day you get to see something like that. Let me just adjust my camera here a little bit. That is next level software engineering. All right, where were we? Oh yeah, and when they have like the loot box model where you're not even paying for the content up front, which is obviously an affront to any sensible gamer, any sensible consumer, because it's not even content, but it's also an affront to it's it goes a step further when you're paying for the opportunity to gamble and maybe get what you want. Maybe. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, this should be illegal. That is unconscionable as far as I'm concerned. Well, no, like, clothes have more function than just expression, but people are willing to pay more money for expression. That being said, the clothing is a product in the physical world that takes physical labor, often very highly exploitative in nature and overseas, that otherwise, without which, you do not have that product. The amount of labor required to create a skin is comparatively minor. There are people who will spend quite a few hours on their CSGO workshop skins. They are digital artists. But you know what? They shouldn't be making digital products for a game if that's what they're out for. Or if they want to make digital products for a game, they should do so in a games design firm. They should be hired by game developers so that they can be paid for their services. They shouldn't make shit on the workshop and then hope that Valve says, this is a reasonable skin, let's put it in a loot box. Because that's fucking disgusting. That is vile behavior. So even when there is actual artistry and masonry at work, even when it is the labor of somebody who has the qualifications to do something truly phenomenal and expressive and artistic, to use that dreaded term, it's still quite sinful at the end of the day, because it's just exploiting that RNG loving aspect of our brains. It's gambling. It's promoting gambling, but to a very impressionable young audience, generally speaking. Which gets into a whole nother realm of like morals and ethics and what should or should not be legal. So I'm not even saying that the people who are making some of the more high end, if we want to call them that, skins, the more impressive skins, are not actual artists or are not really creating anything of value and shouldn't be paid for their efforts. I'm saying they are working on a product that is being implemented in the context of gambling, loot boxes, and mostly targeted to minors who are very impressionable and will see their favorite professional player or YouTube personality running around with the same skin and say, hey, I want that skin. Or, hey, I want to pick up this skin that I know that the best player in the world uses because I like him. I like him as a player. The skin seems cool. Whatever thought process, admittedly infantile in nature, goes through their head. That's what they're going to think to some extent. And it will seem very reasonable for them. I actually would not be surprised. I mean, League of Legends ripped off champion designs from Dota 2 forums and then paid a moderator from the Dota 2 forums to redirect the biggest Dota 2 forum. Or not, I guess it wasn't Dota 2 at that time. It would have just been regular Dota, right? This is very, very early into the company's history. But Riot Games essentially paid a moderator of a very large Dota forum to close the site down. It must have been an admin then. He closed the site down and redirected the Dota website, the Dota forum website, to the League of Legends homepage. In what is probably one of the funnier more ridiculous things that Riot Games has done, and that's saying something considering this is the company where executives are just farting people's faces. Jesus Christ! How is Riot Games a real company? How is that a real company? That is truly like a bad sitcom writer came up with that company idea in a fucking writing room and was promptly ejected out the window, like that old meme where you'd have 4 people having suggestions and the last one of the 4 has a reasonable suggestion and the boss ejects them out the window or whatever. Yeah, I think within the very corrupt and fucked, unethical, I would just say immoral ecosystem of having skins, you absolutely should be supporting the teams by giving, if the people are going to spend this money, we've already accepted all of these fucked premises, then yeah, sure, give the team some skins. Let me slap a G2 sticker on my Navi AK-47 and have the autograph sticker as well, a secondary sticker that has an autograph, and that'll be from the best player on Cloud9 or so, whatever the fuck. Let me do that, sure. And that's what I guess Rainbow Six does, though I don't play that game, so I don't know that much about it. But there are some games out there that do stuff like this. So sure, go that route. If that's at least an area where you can see some sort of digital money, you're sort of having fan merchandise, right? Digital merchandise. The problem is usually again that the prices of these things is so out of whack. So even the skins developers for CS, the skins authors, are skins artists, the skin makers. Even those guys, right? At the end of the day, the stuff that they're doing that's very visually impressive and artistic and all those other things that I said earlier, massively overpriced. Why the fuck are you paying $150 or $300 or whatever for a skin, for a knife skin? I will launch Steam right now provided it doesn't crash my computer again. And I will show you in the skins workshop, or not even the workshop, the marketplace. I don't even know how to get there because I've never been there. Let's see if we can find it. Market. We'll go and search up a knife live on stream. I'll show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. So I will search, let me see. I'll search one of the more tame ones, I think. I'll search paracord. Let's see, paracord. Oh, well, this isn't very tame at all. We've got $339 for a paracord knife. A Stat Trek paracord knife that's going to run you an additional $40, in fact. And then, of course, we have a slaughter knife that's minimal wear, which apparently is over $100 more expensive than the default, about $90, $95 more expensive than the The previous one, we've got a Scorched that's well worn. Now this one's significantly cheaper because it's well worn. So, you know, it's definitely got a little bit of hooks and, you know, all that stuff. So you don't want any of that. All the well worn skins, you can see they're a bargain. Only $164. This is the price of some of my fucking computer hardware, guys. This is the price of physical goods that can make an impressionable difference in your fucking life. And people are spending it on knives in-game, which you can enable in an offline server with a console command. Like, it's not even worth anything. This is disgusting. This is sickening. And this isn't even like again, I haven't cherry-picked it. I literally just walked in here. Let's search butterfly. Because for some reason, all of the Zoomers love the butterfly knife. Even though it's just objectively a trash knife. Wow. Here you go. You want a butterfly knife? Here's a butterfly knife with no skin. On sale for $851. Anybody got $863? Anybody got $1,000 for a StatTrak butterfly knife? Does anybody have $1,000 after tax? If there are even taxes. Does anybody have that? Let's see. We found our first quadruple digit. Butterfly knife Doppler, factory new, $1,000. We've got a slaughter that's almost $1,200. This is the industry, as James Gilchrist says. What's up, dude? This is the industry of Valve. And of course, Valve gets a little cut, a little percentage of all of the sales. So they're swimming. I'm not even sure if they make the most money off of like high sales like this. I'm assuming not. Money laundering. No, people actually spend money on knives, dude. I mean, it's even worse on the case opening sites. It's pretty disgusting. What do we have? We have... I think I built my PC for like the cost of 2 of these. Maybe like 1.5. I don't think I invested more than like $1,000 into the upgrades that I'm currently running. And my original PC build was just $1,000. So for the price of a literal computer, you can buy a knife. Jesus. Well, there you go. That's enough fucking disgust, IMO. What is this? Get out of here. This is the third instance of my fucking task manager. I can't believe that's real. Unreal. And I'm not talking about the engine. Maybe an employee will get mad and stab him to death with them. They've got a lot of stabs that they would need. Let's be real. You called them Gate Beatswell for a reason. Yeah, that's the other thing is these skins. I unironically think that skins are the reason why we haven't seen any sequel to Counter-Strike. Because think about it, unless they somehow manage to transfer all the skins from Counter-Strike Global Offensive to whatever the next Counter-Strike is, that is like literally, it's probably like millions or even more than millions of dollars in fucking digital items. That just goes down the shitter for a lot of people. You know what's even funnier is when people get VAC banned despite having like thousands of skins. Thousands of dollars worth of skins, and those skins are locked because it's a VAC'd account, so you can't even transfer them to another account. It's pretty hilarious. Well, I hope that you don't get busted, because that's been going boom and bust for a while, huh? Although I think the degree to which there was instability may have been exaggerated a bit, but I don't know that much, to be honest. Where were we just now? I think we were. Oh yeah, I was just walking around. I was just scrolling around this map, like adding tiny details because I was too busy raging at the industry. An understandable conundrum to be in. I don't really like this placement though. I kind of want this to be something like that. We'll get there eventually, guys. There it is. I would highly doubt you can launder money that way, personally. Don't think it would work out very well. Can't remember if there was a... I don't think there was a ramp extension tile for this. But I think there was a tile that looked okay in this situation. I guess that was it. Whatever. All right, see you later, Potato Kitty. The app set out triggering. Speaking of triggering, I will be running BioShock again tomorrow, I think. So stay tuned for that. Sure, I'll lose my mind some more in that game. Presumably we'll get deep enough into this story to really start what the fucking pretty consistently. I don't even know who Ken Levine is. Is that a character in a game or is that a developer? That name does sound familiar to me. For some reason, that name made me think of the lunatic who put like a sex scene in Last of Us 2, and he was the guy fucking the woman or something. I don't remember that much about it. I think that was Adam Levine, not Ken Levine. Might not have been that at all, though. I might just be mentally ill. That's a game I won't be running anytime soon because it's a PS exclusive or whatever. Some guy at Naughty Dog, though. This is a shit tile. They did no work on this one. It's only got 2 outer edges. North edges, anyway. Yeah, I'm familiar enough with the first game to know that it's just a... It's obviously not even a game, is it? So... Seems pretty reasonable there. All right, so I've done a little bit of decoration work. I've added what? 1, 2 bases. I'll take it. Still need to get a little bit more work done, of course. I'm glad to have finally fleshed out this bottom left-hand corner, even if I would prefer this to be surrounded in sand. You kind of get that feeling, so it's not the biggest deal in the world. I'll probably flesh it out a little bit more later, but at least there's something there. And then, yeah, it's just about finishing this area up, right? So that's what we'll tackle when I return from my presumably quick break. My thoughts on Dark Souls. Dark Souls is... It's really unfortunate that Dark Souls caught so much hype and adoration from people. I think it's because there were a significant portion of gamers who had never played a game that actually killed them, that was difficult in any capacity, even if the difficulty was fake, which is absolutely the case in Dark Souls. If you consider Dark Souls to be a very challenging game, I think it's mostly because your frame of reference for what is challenging is so skewed by never experiencing a challenging game. I mean, like, the original Super Mario Brothers is considered by a lot of people to be a challenging game, right? Dark Souls is not harder than Super Mario Brothers. Dark Souls has, at least if it rather, this is kind of a shaky definition. When I say difficult or hard, I'm describing the idea that you need to have a high degree of skill to pass a certain bar. Whereas Dark Souls is hard in the sense that you just have to be persistent and you have to fit a very specific play style. There's not very much expression in Dark Souls. The correct way to play, at least in the first Dark Souls game, I'm not 100% sure if this is the same in Demon Souls. I think lock-on and blocking and stuff was really busted in that game. But apparently the correct way to play the original Dark Souls is to be rolling around the entire game and just like using attacks of opportunity, essentially. And then that's essentially how you win the game. That's what is agreed upon by a lot of people as like the best way or highest EV way. I think I'm getting the right game when I say Dark Souls 1 was the one for that. But the games aren't difficult in the sense that the AI is very challenging. The AI just is 2D. The AI doesn't even recognize the Z-axis. It will just fall into its death constantly, especially in Demon Souls. I think the same is true for all of the Dark Souls games. I don't think they ever really properly fixed any of the AI issues, to be honest. They sometimes made them a little bit more aggressive, and they sometimes had those kind of dueling environments where it was just kind of this one-on-one against conventional enemies that maybe did take a little bit of time to defeat if you didn't know your way around them. But at no point were you challenged, and at no point could you be challenged to play mechanically exceptionally well, because the game has that natural sort of input delay. Even if it's not necessarily input delay, there's a lag time to the animations that makes it effectively an input delay on pretty much every action you have, because you have to sort of project your mind a couple of milliseconds into the future in order to get the appropriate timings down. And more often than not, you lose to animations more than actual mistakes. There seems to be a very natural or an unnatural amount of inconsistency in the gameplay loop of that title, where essentially you'll hit an enemy and sometimes they'll stagger and sometimes they won't. And I think this is based on their stamina, which is obviously invisible to you. And it's hard to know if their enemies are even playing by the same rules. Do they have the stamina? Do they get knocked in a hit recovery? There's also these invincibility frames in the middle of your roll animation, for example, which is actually why the rolling was so popular of a strategy, so successful. I think the bulk of Dark Souls, for me, is essentially boiled down to killing the player, especially in the first game, especially in Demon Souls as well. It's essentially just killing the player. And you can't make a game out of just killing the player. The player has to die because they played poorly, not because the animations were choppy or because they tried to use a system that was in your game implemented, but that's not the meta system. That's not the system that has the most success. So they're actually working against their best interests by opting into playing something that's maybe a little bit more true to their personality as a player. For example, if I wanted to go for like a magic build, that's very disincentivized by the meta of the original Dark Souls game. So there's a lot of problems with it. There's a lot of moving parts with it. It's a much more complex game than, say, Super Mario Brothers. But I don't think it's a harder game than Super Mario Brothers. I think it's more artificially difficult without being challenging, without being engaging. And that's my main issue with Dark Souls in general. The AI being very, very poor, the battles being weighted very differently. I believe Dark Souls was a game where by dying you actually had it worse. So there would be like more unique enemies that spawn the more you die or something to that effect. That might have just been Demon Souls, but I think it also extended to Dark Souls 1 as well. And that's kind of a weird decision in general. I think because the game was so liberal in how frequently it would throw things at you that would kill most players, especially if you didn't expect them. Players sort of gave Dark Souls a lot in the reputation specter, where they just allowed you to or they just, praised the game for being difficult, for being challenging, but it's not challenging, and that's kind of the main issue. I'm totally fine with high difficulty. I prefer high difficulty games because they force me to improve as a player. The problem is that pretty much every game I've played, especially in the modern era, has not been challenging. If there's difficulty, it's because there's a lot of HP on an enemy, or they do a lot of damage, or any of these other areas, right? It's more about like the time you have to put into grinding an enemy down. And to some extent, this was also true of Dark Souls, where a lot of the bosses did have pretty ridiculous health bars, but you could DPS them down relatively quickly if you could find an opening. The issue is just your margin of error was so small, and the animation's so clunky, and the stamina bars being so invisible for all of your enemies. It didn't really give you a lot of opportunity to ever get it into a nice groove. So there's my off-the-cuff Dark Souls rant. Not sure how epic it actually was, but hopefully you got something out of it. I'll be Arbito. Yo, yo, yo. I also did like that you mentioned your barber paid a lot of money for PS5. Those scalpers really got everybody, huh? I don't know why you would ever, like, even buy a console, to be honest. You know, Warcraft 3 is slow enough, you could probably play it on a console. As I'm having this snack here, I'm looking over the description of some of these factions to better equip me for maybe imagining some personalities, some compositions that these AI will go for. And I was thinking that obviously we have like the Trinity stuff. I imagine if player one is an AI, he would go like scrapyard into some pretty early cohorts. I do like the whole like agent thing where they have these sleeper agents or whatever. Not really sleeper agents, but they have agents who basically they have this sort of spy network going on. I imagine the Hikatons, since they just showed up here as refugees, they probably wouldn't have any spies in them. So it might even be funnier that like the Hikatons are the ones against that are they're up against or whatever. Like our spies told us nothing of this faction or whatever. So, something to that effect. That could be kind of interesting, I think. I would not take any job at Blizzard, no. I don't think I would take really any job in the games industry. It would have to be very specific. I've thought about this before because people have asked me about like what I would be interested in doing in a more official capacity. I would have to be essentially the game director, which feels like a very pretentious title. I don't have any experience doing this in a formal sense where I'm being paid for it, though. So the idea of me being able to say, "Oh yeah, just hire me as your game director," even though I've only ever done like Starcraft stuff, like modding and you know I've come up with ideas for new engines and new games and stuff, but nothing. I've never actually made anything to present, so I don't know how I would secure a job like this. But in a magical world where somebody decided, you know, we want to put a team of competent developers underneath you and we want you to direct them, then yeah, that would be something I'd be interested in. I obviously have to figure out like what do they want, what are they looking for. I don't even know if the genre of the game would be particularly important because I would probably find some really exciting things to go for, really exciting directions to go for FPS, for an RTS, for even a MOBA. Like, I don't think that there's really that many. There's obviously some genres like puzzle games or whatever that I would have a hard time like stomaching, or finding any sense of credibility or whatever. But I think the other problem is I'm not familiar with the whole budget thing, but I would probably want to veer more towards like single player stuff. Not in the sense that it's strictly single player, but the idea is that the main gameplay would be experienced either single or co-op, and there wouldn't be PvP necessarily as like a major focus. So like the old school days, like maybe 5-10 years ago, where like for example Bulletstorm came out, and that was a game where it had a lot of these games had tacked on multiplayer, like Spec Ops: The Line or whatever. They all have tacked on multiplayer. That's kind of what I'm aiming for, not in the sense that I would want the multiplayer to be an afterthought. I wouldn't. But if I had to pick between like what to focus on, I would definitely be selecting the single player experience, try to make that as competitive as possible in the sense that it competes for your time and even replayable to some degree as well. So that's probably what I would focus on. The thing is, like, I know enough about how these things are put together behind the scenes to know that the odds of me ever getting that opportunity are pretty slim. And also, even if I got that opportunity, it would not be as like, what do you call it, utopian as it sounds. It wouldn't be a panacea in any capacity, because I wouldn't have all the resources that I would need. I would definitely have to make some cuts, or like not cuts, but like I wouldn't want to cut corners. So I would have to come up with a plan to use the budget that I have effectively and development time that I have effectively, and keep people on task, and like remind people like we're going to be making something that's very different. You know, by the nature of my leadership, we're going to make sure that we put some real high quality work into this. You're going to be like I would probably produce a ton of shoulder content, like podcast style stuff where we go into detail about like the development. I'd have a very like transparent, open development process most likely, and I would specifically say like maybe there's different tiers of stuff here. So you know, maybe on this channel or this kind of video comes out, and you can be sure that there are no spoilers for it, but we're just talking broadly about the game systems. And then there's another channel or another set of content where we talk about like the nitty gritty story planning and stuff. That would be more personal for me and maybe some other people who would be interested in like contributing to the writing or whatever. I would produce a ton of shoulder content. I would have make very certain that the key people in the team got some quote unquote representation, I guess, on some of these shows, and then they can kind of be affirmed that we're taking this in a very different direction than normal. And as project lead, I would be responsible for a lot of that stuff, in addition to planning the actual game, right? So I would try to be very like public facing with a lot of the development. I think it would be really interesting to see like sort of behind the scenes of how this industry actually works when you do have somebody who's seemingly competent. I think I would be a competent enough leader in that aspect. When you have a competent leader and you have like a budget that you're somewhat transparent about as well, and that you just say like, here's what we can do, here's what our target is, and you know, should we have to move on from that target to something else by way of needing to wait for some development or whatever, then here's like all of our sub goals or our subsequent things that we can work on as the game launches or whatever. And I think we would essentially have stuff like quote unquote DLC, but I would push very heavily for it to be released for free. Like I don't believe in fucking paying for additional content after the fact. Because a lot of the times, specifically because the budget itself of the game is often spent very poorly. And so they don't have money after the fact when the game goes live to properly get everybody paid without also having DLC in the market. As well as obviously it makes a lot of money for the shareholders and for the actual corporation, but the developers themselves do have some issues there. I'm not alleging that they ever get paid behind time or whatever, or they don't get paid on time or anything like that. But I would like to see a world where we launch the game, it has XYZ content, it gets XYZ sales, and based on those sales, we can afford to employ the development team for this particular project again, and pay them to work on this project again, to work on additional content. Maybe flesh out the multiplayer if it was tacked on, in fact, after the fact. Maybe update it with more single player content, or whatever the case may be, right? And the idea there is we have the opportunity to continue working on it based on the sales, and by virtue of releasing additional content for free, usually targeting multiplayer and replayable stuff so that we support more of those things. My thought process is that would encourage additional sales, and in theory, it could be a perpetuating cycle for 1 or 2 or 3 rounds of that kind of thing, where we drop additional content pieces. And at some point, we get some sort of steady maintenance, essentially, of being able to pay the developers to put out additional content, and that driving more sales, and the more people like buying in the game. And we don't need to sell microtransactions or downloadable content or expansion packs or whatever. We just need to sell the base game copy additional times, and we're doing that by encouraging people to invite their friends because we produce high quality cooperative content, and encouraging people to engage in the multiplayer scene, which means more people are going to buy the content so they can play the multiplayer, all that stuff, right? And that the idea is that you're buying the game and you get all the other stuff for free. I don't know how realistic that is, but I feel like with an appropriate budget and with somebody who's running the show in a tight manner, as I would certainly aspire to do, that is realistic. And I don't know how realistic it really is, but that's just my gut reaction is like, I know that budgets are horrendously mismanaged. There's a ton of budget goes to marketing, and publishers are essentially like taking a bunch off the top for the developer firms. So it doesn't make any sense for why it's like this. And I think, there's a lot of ways to do it differently. It wouldn't necessarily be early access. I see the comparison, but what I'm thinking of is we launch a feature complete product, ideally, and then we flesh it out by adding additional content on top of that for free after the fact, after the game is already launched. A lot of early access games, by definition, are not feature complete. They probably don't even work correctly. They just crash all the time, or they have massive instability, or they're missing massive features like cooperative play or whatever. Our product would be feature complete on launch and get more content so that users could play for longer as time goes on, and that content would be free. So it doesn't even sound that like revolutionary when I lay out all the points, but there's not a single game that's been released like this in the past like 20 years, I feel like. Or if they are, I've just missed them. There's certainly not a single high-profile game where you pay once and you get access to all current and future content. Obviously, all past content if you came in like 2 years in or whatever. Like, it's actually pretty gross to me that DLC is even a term that's so accepted across the industry that it's like a category you can browse on Steam. It's pretty despicable, to be honest. Like, I can see a reason why we would use it in this world where we essentially have the DLC as separate downloads where you download only the game modes and only the game data that you need if we structure our game on a code base level that can be even supported. Whereas that way it allows for people with varying amounts of hard drive space to download the game or whatever. But ideally, if we're doing our jobs right, the game's not bloated to massive, ridiculous fuck file sizes. So yeah. And that's how it should be, right? I'm sure Hollow Knight. I'm imagining a game like Hollow Knight turned a profit. I don't know exactly, but I imagine it did. Especially indie games are so easy to turn a profit on because you're only paying for the development and not paying for marketing most of the time. Although it's hard to call any game indie when it's on Steam. That's another perversion of a term where you're using the biggest platform for distribution and calling yourself indie. But that's the nature of the beast in the digital age, I think. The digital market is much easier to access, just like YouTube, right? Like, this isn't a television show. I'm just streaming this to YouTube and Twitch. Star Sector. All right, sure. My snack break is mostly over now, so I'll check this out and then get back to work. You know what's really funny though is like I look at the model that I just described, and it's exactly like paying for something versus getting ads all the time. Because I don't know, I just feel like there is a ton of what do you call it? I don't know, it feels pretty shit that there's like so much DLC and just like there's so many ads. Like I was playing this is a mad tangent before I launch this one, right? But if we go to like Microsoft Solitaire, I think it's like, oh, I misspelled it, but whatever, it's right here. So this is Microsoft Solitaire Collection, right? I was trying, first of all, I can't even download this on PC because I hit get and then I put in my PIN. And then I enter my password. Oh. Maybe it's this. There it is. Oh, maybe it'll work now. Oh, okay. I guess it worked now. The last time I did that, it just wouldn't work. Now, this doesn't. Well, that's pretty stupid. Go back. You notice this webpage loads incredibly slowly, by the way. So this has 1 million ads in it on my phone, at least. I was going to pay for the app to remove the ads, because if I'm using a product and I find it's worth some sort of money, if the price is fair, I will pay that rather than look at ads all the time. I couldn't, well, I refused to, because it's a subscription service. You have to pay like $3 a month or something, or whatever the case may be, for Solitaire. Like, how the fuck is this allowed? How is that reasonable at all? So, regardless of whether it's subscription service or whatever, I'm more than willing to pay for a product, knowing that I'm not going to get like advertised and hoodwinked for more money later down the line, knowing that it isn't a fucking subscription service bullshit thing. I just want my product. I will pay for the product. It's just ridiculous. Is it all one word? Let's see. Doesn't look like it. It might not even be on Steam. Doesn't look like it is. Let's do Star Sector. Is the desert map for the new campaign? It's a one-off so that I can explore the setting a little bit more. Okay, let's take a look. Star Sector. Oh, it's still in development by the looks of things. It doesn't seem to want to show me this image. Here we go. There's a penis ship. Everybody uses this font. I think this font was used in Five Nations, as well as Planetary Annihilation or something. It's just you. I've seen it on a ton of indie games anyway. This looks like a more involved version of a game that I played with my brother a while ago. Oh, you know what? Was this covered by Upper Echelon Gamers, by any chance? Because I feel like maybe it was. But no, this actually looks different. That game was like a 3D game or something. Yeah, CS:GO has this like recurring, not really subscription thing, but you pay for the opportunity to grind, you doing shit tasks and playing terrible content so that you can earn skins. Nice. And oh, by the way, the price is $15 in America, and the content, the unique content, is actually there for anybody. All you're paying for are the skins. Now, the insane part about this, by the way, is the insane part about this is that people have turned a profit by unboxing, loot boxing skins that are worth more than the Operation Pass was. Because that's how fucked this thing is. So I could probably spend the money on the CS Pass, grind a bunch of I mean, they haven't really turned a profit because their time was wasted doing this. So not really, actually, now that I think about it. But in theory, I could turn a profit doing this. Why? Why is that my reality? Oh, so is it one of these like these RPG type games or whatever, where there's a lot of emergent gameplay that comes or whatever that can come out of it? It's an interesting premise. I'm not really a big fan of like games that I have to look into it a little bit more off stream, obviously, but I'm usually not a big fan of games like those really like in depth like TISM simulator games, basically, where there's like a million stats you got to keep track of, and like, oh, what the fuck, look at all the things I'm simulating. Like, yeah, there's something being simulated here, and it's not my fucking life. Oh, I guess that is true, Baelithal. There are a ton of people who just every time there's a new operation mission coming out, they come out every week or whatever. They're like, let's go play the operation missions. Lunacy. There were a few times where you had to kill chickens in deathmatch. Probably the only good mission in the whole game, to be honest. How much for tile repetition? Well, the Operation Pass stuff was in there before Fortnite even existed as a game. But yeah, in theory, I could sort of see what you're talking about. Where I actually don't know that much about Fortnite's monetization schemes, besides the fact that they're insanely like predatory. But what else is new? Welcome to the games industry, where your favorite pastime has been corrupted into a money-making scheme for corporations that already make a ridiculous profit. You know, it's also even like something that I had a realization recently, and it hit me that there's a significant population of people who like the first game they played was like Fortnite or League of Legends or whatever. They've never played a real game. Like they've never even played anything remotely close to a real game. Even the people who have only played Counter-Strike Global Offensive haven't even played a real game. Like that's a little bit more tenuous, I guess, but there's like how? Like what do you even do when like a significant portion of the populace has only been exposed to just utter trash? Because there's one thing to say that people should have higher standards, but if the only thing they ever know is garbage, then how can you expect them to have higher standards? Just by definition, like they don't have a frame of reference that would enable them to demand something of higher quality. They're not even aware that something of higher quality could exist. So that's a mad like intellectual exercise right there, trying to figure out how to encourage standards without any exposure to something that would classify as a better experience. And then, of course, you get people who are like hiding from anything that is actually competitive by saying stuff like, well, just add some RNG in the game and then it'll be fine. No problem. Because then if I lose, it's not my fault. I can win the game. I mean, people are going to do that even if the game isn't full of RNG, but it's nice when they have a legitimate excuse. The point of casting it is that it's the best FPS that is, or I guess the best tactical FPS currently on the market, and I want to provide a better show than what most people will get otherwise. It's the same reason why I started making the interviews, because there's a lot of interesting people in the space that I've never heard interviewed, and nobody was going to interview them besides me apparently. And then along the way, I obviously interviewed a lot of people who I didn't necessarily know that well initially, or maybe didn't have an explicit interest in interviewing them, and it was more like, oh, here's another interview that I can do. But you know, that was the main reason why I started that channel. Then I got mixed up in the whole casting stuff, which might just fizzle out pretty quick. But if I can make a reasonable amount of money doing that, then sure. I got a gig for another 3-day gig, and this time for whatever 600 euros is in dollars. So about 714 bucks. So I'll take that. That'll be late March, late this month. There's like a bit of a lag time on the payments. You get paid like about a month after you do the job. But if that can be fairly consistent, then I don't see a reason why I shouldn't, because I can provide a better show than people are getting elsewhere and make a bit of money doing it. In a perfect world, there would be a much better TAC FPS out there that has a even more robust ecosystem and esports history, and I could slot in there and start casting that. But none exist. This is the highest quality product we have to cast. So, being as I want to explore casting as an occupation, as a craft, why not? I mean, what other games would I even do? Certainly no MOBAs. Those are pretty terrible. Don't have any interest in Age of Empires, which is the only RTS that's currently in play. I guess technically there are some StarCraft 2 and StarCraft Remastered leagues, but don't really have any interest in casting those. I could probably cast some Brood War, but I actually have spent so much time away from the metagame of that game since I've essentially torn the whole meta asunder by making a pretty massive mod for it that I have no real interest in studying that one up, but it's just when you consider all the factors, CS is like the most natural fit there. IMO. If I can avoid being ripped off, yeah. Yeah, if people missed it, I did assist in the publication of a story to out a fraud, a man. I'll just go to Deserto. This story by Richard Lewis, who's the de facto expert of like esports journalism, investigative journalism in the esports space. So I do like the recommended article. Epic! Wow, Duranding Whisperwind cosplay. It's so good. Yeah, if we can just ignore that, let's just pretend that doesn't exist. There you go. All right, and then you can take a look at this article. Yeah, Call of Duty and Rainbow Six are neither of those are games I'm very interested in. Yeah, I'll definitely be casting HYDRA matches when the tournament goes up. Very excited about that one. We obviously have a little bit of a ways to go there before that happens, but certainly something I'm interested in doing. I mean, I'll be putting some of my casting winnings, so to speak, my earnings, towards the prize pool, I think. So that'll be neat. I don't know how much. It'll probably be like $100 prize pool or something, or just $100 first place. Maybe 200, so that each player on the winning team gets 100. I don't know. I'll figure that out later. Might encourage some players from the outside to pop in and give it a shot. You call CS a dead-end game, but I think it's actually the most stable game out there. Think of all the other games that are out there right now. League of Legends could be a stable game, but I've got zero interest in casting that. And it's also a very closed system, so to make it, I would have to work for Riot Games, which is just fucking sinful. Um, Obviously, Overwatch is going to be in the can in a year. Maybe not even that long. What else do we have? I guess Rainbow Six could be a stable game. I actually don't know that much about that game. It seems to have a pretty reasonable ecosystem for our teams making money, so there's less of a hubbub as a result of that. What else? Call of Duty seems slightly more reasonable than Overwatch, but the whole system that they've got going on, the franchise model, has yet to work properly in a shooter game. So seems to be a lot of problems. Even in League of Legends, there's a lot of problems stewing underneath the surface of, like, for example, the North American League. So I'm not sure how long those will remain stable for. But even then, I would have to work for Blizzard for Call of Duty, so certainly not doing that. Because it's another closed system, right? So in terms of what actually is a reasonable approach, I don't actually see a better game than CS. Again, maybe Rainbow Six would actually be a better approach, but not for me because it's not a game I want to cast, and it's not a game I'm even that familiar with. I would have to essentially be a play-by-play, I think, if I was going to do a game that I'm not familiar with. And I could do that, but there's probably a decent number of play-by-plays already in the in most of these spaces. So it's not an area where I feel like my services would be exceptionally useful. TBH. Yeah, when it's possible. I think anytime you get like an AI solving a game, like chess or whatever, it definitely loses a lot of luster for me. Pretty big deal. Oh, I didn't say it was good. I said exactly the opposite, actually. I mean, for most of this stream, I've been railing against microtransactions and CSGO specifically in that regard. And obviously, I don't think its ecosystem is all that great, but it's de facto the best that we have. And your initial pushback was that it seems like a dead end game, which I think is pretty false, to be honest. I feel like that's just a misread on your part. I mean, I've been doing this for a couple of months now, and I've obviously spent a long time following the game, so I'm not even saying it's like criminal or whatever that you don't know this, or that you know less about this than I do, but it is. I don't think that there's any reason to consider CS a dead end. At least I also didn't even hear any reasoning from you or read any reasoning from you, so if you have some, feel free to share it. Yeah, it's the longest standing. I guess besides Brood War, it might have been the same time. I don't remember. I think Quake is technically the longest standing franchise, but it had a lot of falls from grace. So, and if you, and the same is for Starcraft as well, right? Like it obviously fell off massively with the match fixing scandal that affected all the top Korean players and stuff. So, Oh yeah, as far as Valve is concerned, they have no interest in improving it. But Valve doesn't need to do anything in that space for the esports scene to continue to be worth people's time. If artificial general intelligence solves life, will it be worth playing? Well, I think it's even worth playing chess, which has obviously been solved. It's even worth playing chess now if you're playing against humans who you could beat, right? Just like it's worth playing Counter-Strike if you're playing against players you could beat, but maybe a little bit less worth playing against the top of the top pro players that are just going to own you every time. Even then, you can make an argument for learning from that. And I guess you could do the same for the PC or whatever, like playing against a computer. But I personally don't enjoy games that are solved or that are even solvable, to be honest. I think that they are like some of the most boring experiences possible. But clearly not everybody agrees in that respect, so that's fine. People are fine if it's fine to be wrong. It's fine to disagree with the only person with a 100% correct rate every time. Trying to keep some turret room back here, but doesn't seem very likely, does it? I just find it personally boring, but if people are like, it makes sense why people are into it, in my opinion. Chess, that is. Strangest behavior I have witnessed from a CS:GO bot. I'm tempted to just take the easy one out on that question and say it was just all the jump attacks, but to be honest, I think we've all seen some pretty hilarious behaviors. Strangest, though. I don't know. Anybody in chat have memorable moments from Fraud Nights? Because I am kind of drawing a blank on this. I think it's really funny when like they get stuck on geometry, and just start like shooting the wall or whatever. It's pretty funny. George just asked me a question about HYDRA during a HYDRA mod stream. I'm so angry. No, obviously I'm not angry. I'm not updating HYDRA because there's not really anything to update right now. I mean, we have a pre-patch with a decent number of changes, but I'm waiting for... I guess I could push this. The main issue is that the permanently cloak changes are still not implemented. So until permacloak is fixed, I don't want to update this. But I guess if we shift focus to that for a brief amount of time, then it could be easy enough to fix, actually. I don't know what Veek thinks of that. Oh yeah, when they glitched out because they were all decolliding with each other while trying to defuse or something, and they couldn't defuse. That was pretty hilarious. When they ran out of that vent that was on fire to kill you for throwing a Molotov cocktail. Yeah. Yeah, so they do have very strange behavior when they're on fire. They often switch to their knife, which is hilarious because they don't move faster with their knife out. They always move slower than human players because Valve is really good at hard code. That was pretty hilarious. So I don't think I've personally been knifed before, but I have seen other people be knifed by bots after they throw a Molotov down. I just did by saying your name, dude. Congrats. You are now poked. Fuck's my shit at, homie. There it is. All right. But, George, you will be excited to know that when this next patch hits, it should fix some crashes. I don't know about it fixing... Like, it might reduce the lag, according to what Fagudo said. But I'm not 100% confident in that. I'm guessing that there's, like, more than one reason for the lag. We're still trying to figure that out. It's actually the biggest thing that we want to figure out. That's why it's taken so long, is that we haven't been able to fix that yet. So... Well, if you can just send me a address, I can hook it pretty easily. Or I guess you can. The fuck? Oh, this is supposed to be a main, so I've got to be cognizant of that. So this will be like the NAT for this guy on the top left. We don't really have a prop... Oh yeah, I was going to put a natural over here at some point, which probably means I've got to reshape a bit of this. Although I guess in theory I could just start slapping this together now, to be honest. Yeah, it's... I'm not really 100% sure what is going on there, because obviously it doesn't lag nearly as hard for me. So it must be like a hardware thing, which is pretty hilarious. Your system requirements do not meet Starcraft Brood War. What a reality. I should be able to like specify which bases the AI are going to take. I'll write actual custom AI for this mission, as I would for any serious, quote unquote, serious mission. So that shouldn't be that big of a deal. That RTX stuff was a pretty massive meme. This expansion's kind of a meme. No, it was iQuire who looked into the exact response times, and he said that the AI loop was very expensive. The problem is that that didn't actually bear out in further tests. Disable it, like the map didn't even have AI on it, so that doesn't really make any sense. Why there would be, like, even when you remove all player owned or AI owned units, the map's performance didn't really change noticeably. The AI loop still said it was taking up most of the computation, so I don't know what the fuck is up with that. But the other issue that I noticed, or that iCore noticed, was unit speed and game hooks are the most expensive aspects of GPTP, apparently. That's what he noticed from his testing. So he wants to refactor both of those, try to make them more performant. But I'm thinking it has to be some, like, bug, because I don't know. We would need to figure out exactly around what time the lag occurred, and we don't really have a good testing environment for lag. At least on my computer. My computer almost never actually lags. Like, it takes a long time for me to get a noticeable performance hit. I'll start to notice, like, slower scroll speed somewhat, or like after maybe 15 minutes or whatever, but obviously that's a stark contrast to people who are getting like massively low FPS. We'll notice it in multiplayer because it's slower packet sending or whatever, so of course, like, it has to lockstep you to log all the info and make sure everybody's got it. But in single player, I don't have any issues at all, so it's actually quite bizarre. See you later, bro. Thanks for hanging. The crash log would be in your errors folder. So it would look like, we'll go in here so you can see it. So you'd go to wherever your Starcraft installation is, you'd go to errors, and then it would be like, it would just be something 160101.err. And if you open it, then when you scroll to the very bottom, that would be where the most recent error is. If it's an error that starts in a very high place, like 69590C, well, you can just send me the error code and I can tell you if it's something that I can investigate. If it's something like this, it's not in the normal code. It's in a plugin, so it's obviously not useful then. Yeah, but Balefall, the other issue is we don't actually know if the long computation time of the AI loop is resulting in lag or if it's just an expensive function that actually doesn't have that big of an impact. Like, we can't figure out what exactly is causing the lag. That's the main issue right now. Like, we don't know. We don't really have a proper measurement, I think. iCore said game hooks and unit speed were the biggest issues, and I think it's because unit speed has a lot of expensive calculations every time, like every frame or whatever. But I don't think... Yeah, iCore did say back when we first implemented that system that it would be pretty expensive, but I don't know if that's the reason. Like, it's hard to test this shit, obviously, because of the nature of these programs. If you just remove one plugin, you just get a million crashes, obviously. So I don't know if there's like one thing we can turn off in GPTP to cease all A's communication, and then just the functions don't work instead of them crashing the game. I have a feeling there's nothing like that at all, unfortunately. So. I don't think I even got the link because it's just one of those situations where it doesn't actually send it at all. You might have to like remove the dot or something so it doesn't hyperlink. I'm not sure. I guess it's .cz. Let's see. Yeah, this is a plugin crash. It looks like both of these are. I don't know if I've seen that one before. Well, thanks for sending him anyway. What I can do is I can cross-reference that with other crashes to see if it's something similar. That might have already been one of the things that we fixed though, because obviously you're playing on an older version, and we've had some pre-release stuff out for a while. What the fuck? But it might have already been resolved. I'm not 100% sure. I'll need to take another look. So yeah, it might be quite useful in that respect. Where's my doodad? Did I not make a brush for the ramps and stuff? I feel like that's a prank, but... yeah, you and me both, man. There'll be a lot of new things in the next patch as well. It's going to be pretty large. So... Jesus. So yeah, Veek, since we were talking earlier about the cloak changes or the lag thing, I don't know if there's anything in particular that you want to investigate, but whatever you got would certainly be quite helpful. Whatever you feel interested in. Okay. One of the things that I was toying around with earlier in the previous stream actually was the concept of having like essentially having a couple of cases where the AI sort of react to their starting conditions a little bit differently than obviously other AI. I wonder as well if it would make sense to. I think it would probably be the best opportunity, or it would probably make the most sense from a gameplay systems perspective or a design perspective to have the AI always start with a fixed amount of money and maybe a fixed amount of like supplies worth of units or something. It is kind of challenging to come up with a way to like create units out of a system or whatever. I like the air AI or whatever comes in with a centaur and some area, whatever, you know, like figuring out how to allocate that basically. Like maybe they start out with like 2,000 resources and they spend a selective amount of that on their starting units, and the rest gets spent on like on the battlefield. They just have it in reserve. So maybe that could happen where like they spend 1,000 of each resource on units, and then they have like 1,000 of each resource in the bank. I don't know. It probably wouldn't be 1,000 of each. It would probably be like half gas, like whatever the mineral count is, half of that is in gas. But I think that could be interesting. The problem is getting the AI to engage with a system like this is good luck. Obviously, they're not quite equipped to handle that stuff. So now you've got a nice direct through line here between base 1, base 2. Let's check to see if, yeah, this was kind of my fear, wasn't it? Thankfully, it seems to have fixed itself with just a single movement. Let's just make sure that we haven't botched the placement of anything. Seems good. All right. So we have a work in progress top left. We've got something going for the Protoss starting locations. The challenge will be fitting 4 more expansions into this map. Maybe even more than that. Let's say one of them could be along this bottom cliff, this tar cliff down here, south of this start location. Another could be along the border of this cliff, but that obviously introduces a bunch of issues. I guess there'd be one up here up top. Maybe one up top, one up bottom. And the one on the top could be like the main for this guy, I guess. So again, build around this tar cliff almost. you, believe it or not. What's up, dude? The Luller Man cometh. The Luller Man cometh. I guess it would be kind of thematic for both of the Protoss to be starting off like in the same area or whatever. So the natural for the top Protoss would be up here somewhere by this where this compound is. Natural for the bottom Protoss would maybe be like in the middle of this sand area, and then there could be like a cheeky third down here if I wanted to squeeze one in. Could happen. The anti-Chthon would assimilate a Zerg army. I don't think I've refactored that guy's passive. Inhumane creation. Yeah. So if there's a Zerg army or whatever. Oh no, I did, yeah. So all assimilating all combatants that are slain within 8 range. Personally, I think the Striga is like a very exciting unit. Might even be the best unit. Like just thematically, I mean. Oh, is that like difficult computationally? My sort of isolation thing is really just do they have less allies than enemies in a radius or whatever. It's not like are there no units surrounding it or whatever. Because I feel like this version of isolation actually lends itself to RTS better, even if it's not really isolated. The Siren is a pretty ridiculous name, though. I'll probably rename this passive, but this is a ridiculous unit. Well, their base stats are pretty poor for even a tier 2 unit, to be honest. Like, they do kind of... I guess 6 range is respectable. So they can still be, like, somewhat cost-effective. But if they're, like, busted or whatever, I would just increase their gas cost or something, right? Maybe their supply cost, which would indirectly increase their mineral cost, obviously. And obviously the Autocrat is pretty banging. Since it's got that chronal weapon type. And then after it, like, since it deals full damage to all armor classes, obviously still reduced by armor, after its first attack, it then deals true damage, or whatever you want to call that. And I think the Olympian is a pretty neat concept too, to be honest. The execution thing is pretty neat. The fact that they have a melee attack that deals chronal damage as well, so that if you're targeting, it's only against ground, but if you're targeting like say a Titanic building or a Titanic ground unit, you get these Olympians in melee range, then they could start beating on them. Like that, thematically, that unit ticks a bunch of boxes. Yeah. These are like a lot of these units probably don't even get implemented until later, but until like new engine or some massive extender or something, but well, if there is, that obviously gives us a ton of fucking potential. All the data extenders seem to be working for the most part without too many issues over in remastered, but obviously since you can't have like even a quarter of the concepts that I've written down here in remastered, it's not worth it. And you can't even get good graphics for them either. So, not that we have too many good graphics, but you can't even like implement custom graphics, obviously. So just fucking good luck, you know? Because you would need to somehow have an HD and SD version of everything, or just tell people to only play an SD. But pretty stupid. If the unit ID extender makes it in, that's actually a legit consideration to just work with Brood War for a lot longer, actually. There's still a ton of reasons not to. So we would still likely pivot to our own engine. But I'm just saying, that's not bad. Not a bad idea. Like if we just magically had that at some point, it would be pretty epic. Of course, yeah, the new engine's way better in that respect. Yeah, I mean, obviously all of our code is open source, so if there was ever anything that you needed help with, or you wanted to see an example of, or whatever, that would be pretty trivial for you to get access to anyway. But that's a bridge you can cross if and when it ever comes to pass, right? And good luck making maps in this too. It's not really that hard, actually. It's really easy to get a prototype map done in like an hour, but pretty infuriating to do detailing. I guess it's not really that different in terms of the workload required to do the detailing in Starcraft 2. What really surprised me a long time ago was when Mesk commented that like people don't even bother manually painting pathfinding, which is I didn't make very many StarCraft 2 maps, and certainly none of them were ever even really playable because I never figured out AI. But you can be sure that I painted fucking Pathfinder. It's like the basic thing you want to do. You start your map up and you start like running around with some pre-placed units to test the pathing. It's like the easiest, lowest fucking hanging fruit possible. And people don't even do that apparently, according to what Mesk said anyway. And I think we found that out when we were playing Antioch anyway. There's some serious fuck ups in that regard. How? How, Blizzard? All right. We've got those. We know that there's going to be one here and one somewhere over here. Get this nice canyon over here for units to go back and forth in. Kind of playing around with the idea of this area being a north-facing ramp, but I don't know. I might just reshape this whole right side of the plateau, to be honest, since this seems pretty difficult to defend. Like, even if you slap some units over here, it's like this very heavily constricts the pathway, doesn't it? So maybe this actually goes in the low ground. And then we kind of constrict the pathing of this giant army area. Yeah, I think I just like reshape this at some point. I was initially thinking of putting the stuff along a cliff, like along this side of the cliff, so that the rotation times wouldn't be like instantaneous from the defending player. But don't know if that's really all that great, TBH. For a natural, anyway. Maybe if it's like a high yield nat, has double gas or something. I have seen some untold horrors, that's for sure. I guess I'll just leave that for now, because I gotta actually place the cliff, don't I? Excuse me. Oh, wait. I'm doing the wrong one. There we go. Yeah, UD Commander Commander is in my server. There's a number of people who are in my Discord server that do make maps, but for the most part, people just make like melee maps for Hydra or whatever. I don't think there are too many modders in the space in general. Like, I think I'm probably the only one who's actively been making stuff like this for quite a while. Oh, maybe what would... Do we have high crags? Is that a thing? Yeah, it looks like it is. Just flush this out a bit more. I guess the main issue here is that I'll need to spend... I'll have to find a way to get the crevices in, despite the dirt being around. You can't say it's that dark. I mean, it's kind of a toss-up for me, but remastered is about as bad as Starcraft 2 at this point, at least for modding. Well, maybe that's an unfair comparison. You literally can't mod in Starcraft 2. So. I really need to fix these cliffs at some point. It's just a very time-consuming thing that I've been putting off for a while. All right. Yeah, isn't it possible to disable like the auto clump and stuff, or is that actually fake news? I heard that you could just turn it off in some settings, but maybe not. Hmm. I guess that would be a question for people who have actually messed around with StarCraft 2. And I don't know very many who would be knowledgeable enough. Because that is kind of a deal breaker, isn't it? Right, in terms of like you can still do any what do you call it, like tech demo or whatever, but you can't have a reasonable product if you're just intercepting the player's intent at all times. At least in my eyes, a pretty tough ask, right? And I just hate Sandy Sunken Pit. It looks so ugly. Just realized this was bugged. There we go. Why is that a real? Oh, I just realized I made both of these double gas bases. It's not really what I wanted to do. I'll get rid of this one. We'll replace it with more crystals. And just this once, I'm not talking about math. Actually, what if... What if minerals were meth this whole time? Would we even be surprised? That does sound like a methzin thing. IMO. Yeah, I witnessed some pretty insane stuff playing Antioch, so I think I'm familiar enough anyway with some of the hilarious stuff that was going on there. Oh yeah, against things that like clump up to a ridiculous degree when moving. Yeah. Well, just the fact that you would need to basically gimmick your engine, or gimmick your attacks rather, because of your engine is pretty hilarious, right? Yeah, that's pretty lame. The fact that that's even a requirement just for the engine's sake, because it doesn't support proper fucking gameplay. Can't be surprised, I guess. I think that'll be the sign off for me. We just need to put in one more base, but I'm not feeling it right now. Like I don't have like an inspiration to just start fucking around with stuff up here in the top right hand corner. So I've slapped some stuff down. It'll serve as inspiration later on. I'll probably do some more work before my next stream, which I don't know if it'll be tomorrow. But it could be. Let me actually check the schedule real quick. Now, it looks like I'll be doing a stream Friday. So I'll probably start Friday off with some more Bioshock, maybe some other video work, and then maybe around the same time as I did today, I'll go live for another mod stream. So I will catch you guys very soon. Until then, take care of yourselves. Don't eat too much pizza. Don't become Tony. I don't know. General health advice, I guess. Wave emoji. Thanks for hanging.